Via satellite is Bill Kennedy on the center table there. We have Town Administrator McStay to my left here, and Assistant to the Town Administrator, Allie Kreutz there, taking our minutes. Please do speak up or raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and just add your name for the record. Tonight's agenda, we're going to discuss skateboarding in the downtown area, and then we'll get to small business. We have some more information about the fire and ambulance facility and municipal campus. Looking to vote to move forward with bonding and a selection of financing options, and then we'll discuss the next planning process steps, and then we'll vote to approve some minutes from March 29th. We are streaming on Ustream, Comcast Channel 22, and YouTube.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so skateboarding in the downtown area. I had seen a post on Facebook. Someone in our town was pulled over for skateboarding. And I've seen this come up before, and I've always thought it was kind of amusing that we have a skateboarding policy. But I understand there are safety issues around it. But what I was concerned with was this particular person had only been going to and from a place on a skateboard as a mode of transportation. So my concern was that we were alienating people that were using it as a mode of transportation, just as walking or bicycling would be for many people that don't drive cars. I'm sure there's more to the history of why this policy in our code book is there, and I'm wondering how we can change it.
Sure. Well, I've asked Chief Rd to come so he can speak to the history, the whys and wherefores of this particular policy. And actually, when we discussed this last week when it first came up, he had some really good recommendations for amendments that should be made to the policy because, to be honest, we both find it fairly inadequate. So
Inadequate.
if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Chief Rd to speak a bit to it.
Great. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, folks. All right. I'll go back to the beginning. 1986, the police department was facing a problem with skateboarders at that time. It was quite common for skateboarders to start on Main Street in the area of River Street and go all the way down Main Street, and at a pretty good clip from time to time. Many of the skateboarders would actually sit on the skateboarders, which was a fun thing to do, I suppose. One of the problems we ran into is on more than one occasion, we had senior citizens who were bumped into by skateboarders and who fell to the ground. And this was in the downtown area on the sidewalks when that happened. Outside car mirrors on vehicles that were parked on the upper part of Main Street. We had 3 or 4 of those that were damaged when the skateboarders lost control, bumped into the mirror. A lot of reports from motorists who reported to the police department that they almost hit a skateboarder. And again, this was all in the downtown area at that time. Since the ordinance it was shortly after that, in 1986, that the Select Board at that time adopted the existing ordinance, which is Chapter 179. I'm not sure if you have that in front of you or not. Typically, since that time, when the officers have come across somebody skateboarding in the downtown area, and that's specifically Main Street, Grove to Vale, School, and Depot. They would simply remind them that there's no skateboarding during the day in the downtown area. Most people were unaware of the ordinance as it's not posted anywhere, and that's understandable. Over the years, there's been probably less than a half a dozen people who have actually been cited for a violation of the ordinance, and those were typically multi-repeat offenders. The purpose of the ordinance is to keep the skateboarders safe from being struck by vehicles, keep pedestrians safe from being bumped into by skateboarders, prevent vehicle damage, and prevent drivers from having to face yet an additional hazard in an often congested area, that being, again, primarily the downtown area. Now, skateboarding is permitted throughout the remainder of the town, and you often see them on Summer Street, Union Street, and various other places. One of the things that's in the ordinance under 179(4) and 5, they use the term central business area, which is not clearly defined anywhere. So over the years, what we've done traditionally is apply the ordinance on Main Street from River to the Main Street Bridge, Depot, School, Grove up to Vale Street. Once we get outside of that area, it's usually less congested with vehicles and people, pedestrians. It also uses the term in 179.4, paragraph A, during regular business hours, and again, that is something that is not clearly defined. So what we've done traditionally there is follow the same time frame that's used for the 2-hour parking, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., except for Sundays and holidays. It's important to recognize the fact that some skateboarders are very talented and skateboard quite well, while others are not. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. Additionally, the ordinance does not force skateboarders to have to walk great distances. So if somebody were to skateboard in from, let's say, someplace on Union Street, to walk within the confines of that area where the ordinance applies is a matter of a couple of 100 feet, maybe 100 yards at the most. So they're not being forced to walk a half a mile or a mile. I have 3 recommendations. Basically, it's clear. The first one would be to clear up some of the language which would clearly delineate what is the central business area. The second would be to define what regular business hours are. I don't necessarily believe it needs to be as early as 7 p.m. or as late as 6 p.m. 7 a.m. or as late as 6 p.m. It could be 8 or 9 a.m. until perhaps 5. There's also paragraph B under 179.4, which actually prohibits the use of skateboards town-wide from dusk to dawn. I really don't think that needs to be in there, and I would recommend that that be repealed entirely. So the bottom line is, it's skateboarding during the day, currently, and it's on those 4 streets only in the downtown area. And it's designed to, it was put in place to keep the pedestrians safe, the skateboarders safe, and to make it safer for the motorists who are trying to navigate around without having to worry about skateboarders zipping in between them. That's really all I have on that.
So we do have, there are 3, there's A, B, and C under 179.4. You alluded to both, and I'll read A completely. No person shall operate a skateboard as defined herein upon a public highway or upon the lawful sidewalks in the central business area and shopping plazas, villages, or malls in the town of Peterborough during regular business hours for said business areas. And then B is no person shall operate a skateboard during the hours of dusk to dawn in the town of Peterborough. And finally, C, any person operating a skateboard shall at all times yield the right-of-way to any motor vehicle or pedestrians present and shall operate said skateboard in a prudent and careful manner at a reasonable rate of speed. In my view, we only need C. C seems to spell it out fair. Any person operating a skateboard shall at all times yield the right-of-way to any motor vehicle or pedestrians present and shall operate said skateboard in a prudent and careful manner at a reasonable rate of speed. That eliminates people going fast down the hill, that eliminates people being out in the traffic, it eliminates people bumping into people on the sidewalk. The other, and then it allows someone who's commuting to work or going to an appointment to be on their skateboard. Walking is considerably slower than being on a skateboard. It's a fair mode of transportation. I guess that's all I have to say about it. Anything from you?
Well, the first one, if it was going to be on any certain streets, that, I don't know, that's one thing, but I think it's kind of funny that in the original ordinance, they put shopping malls and stuff that the police are, private property, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I can't answer that.
Well, I mean, 1986, I can answer it. You don't need to. I remember when it happened, when the ordinance happened, and even since then, I've had a few instances about it. The only thing I'd hesitate to do is removing it completely from the immediate downtown area. And I think it's only just because I'd be, concerned that if it gets out of hand again, then we need to do something again. But like you said, it does it does cover it. That's if a town ordinance actually makes people follow it. I mean, it's probably a little like speed limits, right? There's speed limits everywhere that doesn't always seem to work.
How many times are you waiting in a crosswalk that people don't stop? How many times do bicycles not stop at stop signs? They go down the hill. It's all become acceptable. I think we're singling out skateboards. And certainly, quite honestly, I don't think our police need to be spending the time policing people on their skateboards when they're not cutting it up or bumping, if they bump into somebody, then they violated something. I just think it's really unfair. Bill Kennedy, do you have anything to add?
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I do agree that we should take out that limitation of dusk to dawn. I can't imagine some young man skateboarding in his own driveway should be subject to any kind of ordinance. I also noticed that there is explicit omission of scooters. Kids ride scooters around, not motorized scooters. They're operated very similar to a skateboard. We might consider adding those to this ordinance, but relaxing some of the language that's rather restrictive in this particular ordinance or chapter.
I don't really have a dog in the fight, we can wait and hear what people have to say. I think a real important part of it is when that ordinance was put in, there was no stop sign out here, up or down
Correct.
Main Street.
That's correct.
So like, you could, as fast as you can go without getting blown off a skateboard down this road and not have to stop for a stop sign or anything. I think that was probably it.
Imagine how great that felt
of it.
with the wind blowing through what hair you had there.
I don't even know what people did trying to get out of Roy's when this was happening.
Anybody in the audience like to ask a question?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Because I actually brought up an interesting point. I don't know the answer to this. Do skateboards and scooters fall on, do they have to stop at stop signs? Are they regulated by speed limits? Can they skateboard on sidewalks under state law, or are they only?
There are no state laws that govern scooters or skateboards,
Mhm.
whether it be on the road or sidewalks. There are a number of state laws that cover bicycles,
Right.
speed limits, stop signs, front light, rear light, reflectors on the pedals.
Brakes and all that,
Mhm.
they're regulated just more or less like cars are.
Yes, they have to follow what is called the rules of the road, bicyclists.
Yeah.
There's nothing in place under the state chapters for scooters or skateboards.
Chief, you said there were 6 instances since 1986 where someone was fined?
Approximately, right. We actually had to find people that continued to simply defy the ordinance, were warned again and again and again.
Was that the same person 6 times?
No.
Were they all teenager, adolescent boys?
Well, sorry,
I
Lars, let me
can't answer
I'll
that.
have to go through the chair. I'll call on you in a second. My follow-up was, so if there's only been 6 really since 1986, if we were to put a hold on this for a 5-year period and reassess if there's any kind of issue. My real concern was someone who wasn't an adolescent that was intentionally causing trouble was stopped because they were on a skateboard. It just seemed to me like that's just wrong to them. And so I just have a bad feeling about that.
Oh.
Okay, yeah.
I was just going to say, and this is of course pending any, input from the public, this is something that will have to go to a public hearing to do any kind of amendment to this chapter, as you know.
Sure.
Would it make sense for Chief Kennard and myself to, draft up some language, some proposed language that would take into consideration some of your thoughts on this, and then present that to you before we post it, just to get some ideas? Because, rather than, yes, anytime you could certainly test something, put it out there for 5 years and then revisit it, but it's still going to require, again, holding another public hearing.
Sure.
So, just a thought.
Well, and that's a good question. That's certainly something to entertain as an idea. It also states in here, it refers to a couple RSAs, and one of them, RSA 31:39, specifically talks about town meeting being the creator of this ordinance, but not necessarily the amend or?
I believe that, I'm
It's
not
the
sure. I'll
authority.
They're the creating authority, not for this particular ordinance though, right? Thought this
That's the
was
statute that gives the board
the authority to
to
create the
adopt
ordinance.
ordinances.
Yeah, so town meeting adopted essentially town code and gave the selectmen authority to make and amend codes regulating the use of roadways and whatnot.
Okay, so this was, the select board at the time was lobbied, this was put in place, it didn't go to town meeting for a town vote,
No,
okay.
I don't
So we
believe so,
can't
no, it's-
easily amend
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I mean, all the ones that are done town meeting appear in the first half or the first portion of the town code book. This is in the later portion, so.
Okay, and so getting back to that, we could then also combine no bowling on Sundays and the bingo
Oh, yeah,
portion
we
of
could
the
do
code.
all of those,
They were just
funky
outdated
little.
and
Wait, you can't bowl on Sunday?
in our town code. Oh, I think it's before 11. What is it, chief? You should know.
I'm
I'm sure
guessing that had
someone's
something to do
waiting
with
out
the
front
people who live next door to the bowling alley.
I'm not the bowling officer, so.
Well, so this has to go to a public hearing even if we were to amend it?
Any
Or does it have
amendment.
Just
any
one or
amendment.
two?
If you could do one, you could do 20 at once, but those all have to be done at a public hearing, so anytime we.
Well, let's make it 20 and
Yeah.
get it out of the way. But the only thing I would say that before any public input is, well, first of all, when this person was stopped on their skateboard, that as ridiculous as it may sound, this is an officer doing the job that he was hired to do. So I don't want to turn it into something different from that.
Well, I mean, but section C
shouldn't.
says, any person operating a skateboard shall at all times yield the right of way to any motor vehicle or pedestrian present shall operate said skateboard in a prudent and careful manner and at a reasonable rate of speed.
Yeah, fair.
Oh, but you're saying it happened in this restricted area?
Yeah.
The restricted zone.
Well, it wasn't like he pulled him over at the skate park and said, you can't skate anymore. So anyways, aside from that, I'm just making that point. Aside from that, if, before any public input, obviously, maybe if we were to say, we can suspend it until the end of the year, and if there's some egregious errors or some band of, vagrant skateboarders all of a sudden took over the downtown.
Skateboard gang.
Or, I mean, I'm just making that
It might make it a little
suggestion.
exciting downtown.
Well, I mean, I think it could.
If it was like-
But I mean, rather than just say, okay, it's gone for 5 years, if we tempered it with, we could just look and see if something crazy is going on and by the end of the summer.
I would caution the select board against putting any time limits onto town code, because as you have just brought up, these things often don't get looked at for quite a period of time. And so any limitation like that would be, might be forgotten about
Fair
in the
enough.
next
So
5 years, so I.
Just abolish it. we're good?
Whatever revisions that you make, those, I wouldn't put a limit on them, I would just make the revisions.
Okay.
Hey, Chief, can I ask you, what if we were to equate skateboards with bicycles? Have the same rules and regulations and responsibilities for operation of skateboards, particularly in the downtown area?
That effectively does away with the ordinance.
So what you're saying is take the state law language that applies to bicycles and
Yes.
apply that to skateboards?
I think you'd have to make some modifications, it would be pretty hard to put brakes or reflectors on skateboards in a way that would make
Yeah.
any sense.
Yeah, that's a good
It
point.
would-
Yeah.
Yeah, some very creative writing.
Yeah,
Well, let's just not make it difficult. We want to just hear what the public has to say about it.
Are you ready for that?
I'm ready. I'm always ready for that, Tyler.
Lars, go ahead since you were first hand up.
My name is Lars Clove, I'm a resident here. I'm an educator and an advocate for bicycle riding. And I saw this, and I'm assuming that this has to do with mostly adolescent and teenage boys.
skateboarders, there's no specific.
In 1986, it probably
Yeah,
does,
there's no age or
I've-
gender identified in the
Yeah.
code.
I've spoken to some of the boys that I've seen here, and they're looking for something to teach themselves a certain thing. And so that's what they're riding around looking for. And they're not gonna find it here, is the thing, so I'm assuming that this will just shift. I've asked them about the skateboard park, and their opinion is that it doesn't have what they're looking for. So they're looking for physical something, to practice something. And that should be encouraged, because it's actually like a high level of learning. When you're talking about physical education, the way kids learn and teach each other, and when kids are teaching each other, that's a very high level of learning, especially when they're coming up with something that's very different than regular PE programs. So that's the important part of what I see them doing, is that they're trying to learn something. And it would be right, in various other places that I've lived, skateboards do fall somewhat under the category of bicycles in terms of the way they have to obey traffic laws, but not in terms of how reflectors or brakes. And you might be able to find answers to that by looking at other places and seeing how they address it. So, I do have some experience in this area. It's important to me.
I feel like the statement operates as skateboarding in a prudent and careful manner and at a reasonable rate of speed is all you need. If someone's doing curb cut, I don't know the terminology, but up on the curbs or doing, running the rails out front then that may be a disturbance, but a prudent and careful manner and a reasonable rate of speed is all you need to say.
My concern honestly is that language is very vague. And it's
Exactly.
open to a whole lot of interpretation by many people, including the rider and the officer. So I think it might be worthwhile, just maybe even looking to better identify some of what that means. What does prudent manner mean? I guarantee you it's going to mean a whole lot. It's going to mean two very different things to me than it will necessarily mean to a young person riding a skateboard, or even an older person riding a skateboard, to be quite honest. I mean, a skateboarder could be someone who's looking to, to grind the curb or rails or what have you, or it could be a person on a longboard who's just looking to move from point A to point B. Their ideas of what's prudent and what isn't prudent can be quite different as well. So.
Thank you. You're making more of a case to abolish the whole thing. Yes, Mr. DeWitt.
I think the chief has made it pretty clear that over the last however many years, officers have exercised their judgment. And I think they have shown the ability to interpret prudent. Okay? And if someone disagrees with an officer's judgment, then they can always explain it to a judge, right? But 6 citations, and they're all for excessive repeat offenders. That's pretty kind. The other thing is, I do think that that restricting by streets, as the chief outlined, that they're currentently enforcing, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because we do have a lot of older people. The only question I have is how do we avoid forcing the skateboarders into the street? Do we really want them competing with traffic? I don't know. So that's it.
My concern was somebody commuting to an appointment.
No, I get what brought this up, yeah.
Definitely.
I like your solution. I agree that it's a little hard to define, and it hasn't been a big problem, but I recently was in Nashville, and I actually rented a scooter, I think it was a skateboard, it's like a scooter, I guess it was a scooter, electric scooter, and they're becoming more and more used in the big cities and not out here, but I could see residents who live down near the playground, they're far enough away that they don't want to walk the whole way. I definitely can see what you're saying, that people will start commuting, could try to commute. And in Nashville, you couldn't ride on the sidewalks. And, you know, I would be concerned about people riding down Grove Street on a scooter, not on a sidewalk, because then they're practically in the middle of the road, and the road is quite narrow for two cars going either way. I don't necessarily think you have to tackle it now, but I do think it's something that might need to be thought of in the future. And I think getting the public input is a really, really good idea. And I think what he says about the kids maybe need something else for their playing with it, and maybe that's the primary thing that's happening now, but I don't really think it's going to stay that way. I think there are going to be adults using scooters and stuff in the future.
Speaking of kids playing, I'm also, I'm aware of kids getting knocked for being inside or on their phones or on computers all day. And this is the reason, because in 1986, kids were outside enjoying their lives. And the old people stopped them from being outside enjoying their lives. And then these gadgets were invented, and now you get harassed for enjoying yourself outside, or for being on your computer all the time. Carol?
Carol Nelson. I just want to know if Bill was one of the offenders.
No, that's why I don't have a dog in the fight. I can't skateboard to save my life. Not from here to the chief.
I'm
gonna say, in 1986, I was a kid here in town, and, you know, the ban on skateboarding didn't stop us from playing outside, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
Over time,
my actual comment was,
kids were
sorry,
saying, yeah,
sorry Tyler, didn't mean to interrupt you. There actually is a GoFundMe campaign that's happening to increase what's at the skateboard park. So I think that's an individual person that's doing it, is my understanding, so there is something afoot to get more out there for them to have more to do.
More on a destination, but, you know.
Sure, and that's interesting.
Even better.
That would be great to offer that as well. But we had a series of events at Bass Hall with the community conversations, and one of them was, how do you retain youth, or what can we do for the young people and so forth. And us old people are like, well, let's get some programs at the community center, and but then there were some kids that were like, we don't want to go to your community center. You're adults. We want to find our place and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't schedule everything for kids. How are they going to learn?
Well, it's the best point that's been made all day, is if we're really talking about attracting more people with families and kids, and, yeah, okay. Who else?
Mandy?
Yeah, I'm Mandy Sliver. I just wanted to just kind of say in favor of Tyler looking at that Part C only, because I feel like singling out streets for people operating in a safe manner is just alienating the people who want to do it safely. And if bicycles, it is a very narrow center down Grove Street, but if someone's operating unsafely, it falls under that Section C. If they're operating safely, why can't they operate the same as a bicycle would in a very congested area? But again, I feel like C kind of covers it. Like,
Sure.
if they're operating safely and not in anyone's way, and bicycles are allowed in that street, there shouldn't be any reason why we're telling them they can't do it. But if they're unsafe, then hit them for the other part.
And walkers as well. I've seen some of the people walking around here on the bench.
I just saw you coming into the meeting like crazy.
If I'm late. I saw another hand. Yes, Bob.
Bob Herring-Smith. Just to go back to a point Bill Kennedy raised earlier, I think under the definition of skateboard here, a scooter, traditional scooter, would be a skateboard. On the other hand, I don't think e-bikes or powered scooters are covered by this ordinance at all.
I don't think so.
No, they're
The
covered by state law.
skateboard definition in this particular ordinance, any wheeled vehicle intended and designed to be propelled by 1 foot with 1 foot on the vehicle at the moment of initial propulsion.
Bikes and e-bikes are regulated by state law extensively.
And scooters, powered scooters?
Powered scooters, I believe, are,
Yes, the
Yes.
power bikes, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Anything
If
that's
somebody's
more than
being
you
a
would cover.
menace on a bicycle, on foot, on a skateboard, or whatever, there's other avenues besides having a ordinance, right? There's nothing that says you can't, if you're, running into cars or causing problems, that you can't talk to them anyways, right?
Under the disorderly conduct statute.
Yeah, so
Anything
the more
that-
we talk about it, the less I see any need for any of it.
Any activity that interferes with the flow of traffic would fall under the disorderly conduct state law.
So,
Yeah, you're a great point about the shopping plazas being private property. Villages is kind of vague.
yeah, there's all kinds of days. Honestly, I don't see any need for any of it.
Interesting. Anybody else in the audience? Yes, Bob?
About both. I'm just like to say we can barely hear Bill Kennedy. Can we turn up the volume on his computer? It's very hard to hear him.
That's
Bill.
as loud as I can get that speaker to go,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Want to sit up here, Bob?
Anyone else like to add anything? All right, I would make a motion that we go ahead with some ideas about either abolishing this or a very generous rewrite, or, and then have public hearings.
Are there any, I mean, just, and I'm not saying you need to list them right now, but if there are any other ordinances you'd like to take a look at, I can put them all into the same notice, and we can have a pretty big public hearing to revise town code. and
Is
get-
there a section of the town code where it starts ridiculous ordinances for under one, or are they just sporadic?
I think they were well spread across all 300 and some odd pages, unfortunately.
I'm honestly not willing to do the homework on that one.
I will give it a quick look. I mean, it certainly, I mean, bingo and bowling caught my eye when I read through them, and I thought they were rather ridiculous. but I'm sure
Bingo is
they-
actually required, the state law requires the town to adopt an ordinance before allowing any kind of a bingo event. So the fundraisers, for instance, and all that stuff, you have to have a town ordinance in place before you can actually allow a nonprofit to hold a bingo type fundraiser.
You're actually-
Even bingo has gotten out of hand.
State law has actually got Games of
Kids to go
Chance.
flipping.
It's a chapter,
Yeah.
and it's heavily regulated by the state.
That goes for any, like, church raffles or anything like that. So some of them they're weird, they seem arcane, but they're still required. So,
Do we need a motion to make
No.
this go with?
no, I'll just get it on the schedule.
All right, next one.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for entertaining that.
Thought that had been much more heated today.
Well, hopefully we're not spending our tax dollars on leasing people through.
Well, turns out they have other things to do, that's what I heard. Probably a lot more than they did in 1986, too.
That's,
Probably by a factor of 1,000.
thank you, Chief. Thank you very much.
You're welcome for coming.
Thank you, folks.
All right, up next, has anybody heard about the fire and ambulance facility in Municipal campus? Well, as you might have noticed, if many of you were at town meeting the other night, we've heard from many people. We've really realized that we made a mistake going for the whole guns to try and get federal funds and rush that through the whole project for town meeting. So it was a pleasure the other night to hear from everybody and then have an affirmative vote for this step in the design process, which is super important to really nail this down and get it right. Find a building that'll really meet the needs of the operation and their program, but also protect townspeople in their property tax bills. So, where are we?
Well, we are at a point where the select board will need to make a decision. The New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank is finalizing its applications for the July bond sale. And so we've got approximately 14 hours for the board to make a decision so I can get this submitted and make sure that we have a complete application in. So once the board has made a decision about whether or not to go with Municipal Bond Bank or to go with a private bank, I'll need to finalize the package, send that over to our bond counsel for her last review. You've got some other paperwork that will need to be signed, and then that's it. Then we'll wait to hear back. But the first question, though, that goes before the select board is, which way do you want to go? New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, just to set the difference between what we're looking at. New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank is offering us an interest rate of 2.5% over 5 years. that total interest will be $113,750, assuming that that goes through as predicted. People's Bank, and People's Bank is fairly representative of most of the private banks that we would be looking to apply to, have offered us an interest rate of 3.4%, making total interest owed $132,600, so roughly a little less than $20,000 more over the life. There is potentially some flexibility in that, but nonetheless, you're going to pay for that flexibility.
And we've had, Lily Gilligan, our finance director, has had great luck with the New Hampshire Bond Bank and refinance or getting better rates over time.
They've been great. Now, keeping in mind that because these are such short-term loans, we would not be looking at refinancing it. This is basically, you take out the loan and that's it. We'll get a $1.3 million check, which will be administered by the finance department and town treasurer.
And remind me where does New Hampshire Bond Bank get their money to then loan to those?
They sell bonds on the bond market,
Just
yes.
regular people.
Yep, exactly. So if you have somewhere in your retirement investment portfolio municipal bonds, this is what you're buying.
So, coming from that perspective, that would lend me to go towards that one as opposed to a private bank. What do you think?
I think the catch with the bond bank is if we don't, we take out a loan for 1.3 million no matter what. And with the other way, we don't have to take out a loan for 1.3 million. We might spend far less than that and not have taken a loan for a full amount that we didn't need in the first place.
So another way to look at that is your authorization to borrow this money is only good for 5 years anyways. After 5 years, you will have to go back to town meeting to get that money. So you only have 5 years to borrow this $1.3 million, regardless of where you borrow it from.
Yeah.
New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, if you were to borrow that entire amount of money, the $1.3 million, you would have that money available to you for potentially longer. So it could go, that money could be used further out into the project because you will have already taken that. If you don't take the full $1.3 million before the 5-year authorization runs out, then you won't have the balance of that to use towards the remainder of the project, regardless of what the interest rates are in the future. Another thing to consider is, yes, you'd be looking, if you took it in smaller increments from a private bank, you'd probably be making smaller payments along the way until you took out, unless you took out the full amount. When the Hampshire Bond Bank, if you went that way, yes, you would be making the larger payments. However, if you don't end up using all of the $1.3 million, you can actually use those bond proceeds to pay off the bond itself. So, you will still be spending a little bit, potentially spending more in interest, but, again, with the difference between 2.5% and 3.4%, it could end up being a wash. So, which way would you like to go?
Bill Kennedy, you have anything to add?
I do. Couple questions. First of all, if we make application to the bond bank, are we obligated to take the funds?
I believe, yes, I believe so. Once the application's completed and submitted, there may be one more acceptance step, but basically, they're going out with the understanding that the select board will be taking those funds.
Okay. Second question. We don't know what the anticipated cost for this particular design period is involved, but we can apply those bond monies to further the process. We're going to build a new fire station, right?
Yep.
That's pretty well decided by the town. So we can apply those funds as needed, not necessarily just to these soft costs, but maybe some hard costs in the future. So the other thing that I think is important is that we're lucky to get the 2.5% interest rate. We know with inflation, interest rates are going up. They're not going down over the next several years. So this may be prudent to take the money now at the low interest rate.
Fair enough.
I brought silence into the room.
No, good points, Bill, thank you. Carl, what would you like to add?
Thank you, it's Carl Mazzino. I'm hearing some suggestion here that this money could be used for something other than design and engineering, and yet the authorization for taking out this bond specifies only design and engineering as its use.
I believe that that is correct, unless you went back to town meeting for a later vote to apply the balance to another purpose. I believe that would be the remedy. So it would be town meeting at a time in the future.
Which we've certainly done before, correct?
Not with bond proceeds. And so that's why there's a bit of a question mark, I think, on that end of that statement, because I'm not entirely sure how that would work, but it would seem to me that that would be the remedy.
Great point. Carol Nelson.
Yes, Carol Nelson. In conversations that I've had with people in the room here about this, I was assured that we don't need 1.3 million. So if we don't need 1.3 million, I don't want a bond for it.
I believe it was 2 million. We don't think we're going to need 2 million, but I understand what you're saying.
Thank
Yes.
you. We don't need 2 million. I don't want a bond for it.
And I have a question too.
Yes.
It's Tom Momeyer,
Oh, hi,
I'm
Tom.
a resident. And Nicole, you mentioned if the option to do the 1.3 million, you mentioned something, but it went by pretty quickly. If you didn't use the entire portion, what happens with the remainder? Did you say it could be used to pay down the principal?
Yes, can be used for principal and interest payments.
Bob Herringsmith, is there no early prepayment penalty?
There's no penalty, but there's no grace either. You can pay off the full amount and the full interest at any time.
I see, you have to pay the full, interest no matter what, okay. Never mind.
Carol again?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, we're not bonding for 2 million. We agreed to appropriate 2 million. The
Correct.
bond is 1.3 million.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
yes.
Stephanie?
Well, in regards to what he said, so if we borrow the whole amount up front, and then we have to pay the whole amount of the interest, to me that seems like a negative for going for the whole bond at once. And one of the other points that I go along with what Carol is saying is, we were told that we would try very hard not to utilize the whole 2 million that was proposed. We already have 700,000, so it seems like it might be worth going for the smaller amounts as needed more. And the other thing was about the time period, because I really thought that when we voted for this, for the project engineering and design to go forward, that it really would be done within a year. I mean, that would be the hope, anyway. So that next year we can have a proposal for actually what we're going to do for building. And if that's the case, we're really only talking about 1 year, not 5 years.
Yeah,
So-
it's unlikely that a project of this scope and complexity is going to be done in a year. I don't think it's going
I'm
to be done.
not saying the whole
in 4
project
years.
is done, I'm
No, I
saying
mean
just
the
the
design.
design and the engineering.
The design phase will not be done within a year. It will take longer than that. We've already seen the results of a rush to get ahead of a certain deadline, and it certainly didn't yield what we expected it was going to yield.
Right.
And that was going from a town meeting to the next town meeting. This will take a long time, especially with the robust public process that the select board's committed to engage in. So,
In which case, we're paying, the municipal bond is, you said it expires in 5 years, but you're paying the interest for the whole period, no matter what you do or when you pay it back. You're paying the same interest for that whole 5-year period. So to me, that's a negative for that choice. Because if you borrow what you need as you're going along, then you're not going to start accruing the interest.
The risk there is that the interest rates are going to increase. It's 3.4 right now. It could very well be 5% at the end of 2 years. Unfortunately, as the Fed works to try to put limits on inflation, what they're doing is increasing the interest rates. So this is, in my understanding, having spoken with New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank and a number of other people who are involved in this, is beyond me, honestly. But they don't believe that we're going to see 2.5% again anytime soon. So that is really, if I were asked to make a recommendation, that's the one I would make. I think it's more fiscally prudent to take the lower interest rate, even though we would need to take the entire amount.
I have a question. Do we know, hopefully we do, if we went with the People's United, is this essentially a line of credit at 2.5% or 3.4%, or is this, it's the interest rate when you take it?
It's the interest rate when we take it.
Wow.
So
That's important.
yeah.
I have to emphasize, penny wise, pound foolish again. If we don't take the full amount at the 2.5% and then apply whatever whatever monies we have left over to the ongoing project, I think that would be imprudent.
Well, any money would have to be used to pay off this particular loan.
Or
Which is fine too.
Unless we're able to read.
Column A, column B. It's-
Yeah.
And keep in mind this, the specificity of the language, as Carl pointed out, the design and engineering, which engineering could go on and incur other costs.
You will have, whether it's architects or engineers or a combination of the two, they will be on board throughout the entirety of the project. So however long, large municipal projects, as we've seen in recent history, take many years to come to fruition, so.
Yeah, and 9 months from now, if we're taking out another $300,000 or $500,000, it could be 5% for all we know. And there is a risk
Yeah.
of that.
Carl?
There is some inflexibility in the, using the bond bank. However, we don't have to take we don't have to spend the 700,000 first.
No.
That's correct.
So that money has much more flexibility. So if you take out the bond for 1.3 and you are trying to minimize the amount you spend on design and engineering, you might even be under 1.3, but engineering is such a vague term that it's, there's no way you're going to spend less than 1.3 in design and engineering over the life of the project. So it seems to me, as a practical matter, you spend the inflexible money first, the bond, and then you spend the 700,000 as needed going forward. And that way you get your better interest rate.
I move that we go with the New Hampshire municipal bond route.
I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's the way to go. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good questions, good points of clarity.
Too much risk.
Any other discussion on the next steps of the planning process?
It's up to you. I believe that the next steps are, for us, definitely going to be submitting all this paperwork and moving forward. My recommendation is that the selectmen and everyone else take a little bit of a breather, since it's not July 1 yet. We still have some time yet to, before we even have authorization to go forward with the next step in the process. So I think probably just taking a pause, collecting input from the public, what we haven't heard from, if we haven't heard from them yet, on their ideas on how to proceed. I know a number of you already in this room have submitted a lot of really great ideas to consider. Let the select board take some time to go over those. And we should be scheduling a workshop, as we do annually anyways, to give you some time to mull that over and take it back to the public for probably a series of meetings over the summer, thinking probably starting the second meeting of June, or maybe the first meeting in July and going from there.
I'm all for taking a break, but I don't want to anyways. I think there's plenty of legwork and there's plenty that we can be doing without, taking an official break. So I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing anyways.
Okay. So would you like to schedule the next discussion on this project then for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Let's see what's transpired, sure.
Okay.
Let's
Till
talk
it's
about it
done.
every meeting until
Till it's
they're
done.
sleeping in the building.
Okay.
I wrote that. Or
Put it on the
they're not
schedule.
sleeping, they're waiting for a call.
Okay.
All right, minutes from March 29th.
So you're not going to take any comments from the public now?
Regarding,
Regarding the planning process. I had a couple of
sure.
things that I really
Sorry.
wanted to say. I'm Stephanie Hurley, and I attended the meeting, and a lot of good ideas came out. And I had a discussion with one of the members of the Library Planning Committee, and although she did not agree to be part of the committee or the work group, but she said that it would be, I think, a very important step for the work group that you guys have to meet with them and to sort of get their opinion about the things that worked for them, the things that didn't work, some of the processes that they went through. Tori mentioned value engineering at the meeting, and I think that's really critical. One of the things that this person told me was that they had 30 people, and they divided the town up, and they went canvass door to door to find out what people wanted in town. And so, I'd like your planning process to include some of these steps. And I'd also like to know how it's going to stay open and transparent, because that was one of the promises that you sort of brought up, that, that the public will be able to see what's going on before it gets
I
proposed.
believe we committed to that already. That's almost like a veiled. You're not gonna be
Yes.
transparent.
and if I hear one more person say that we're not being transparent, I'm gonna
I didn't
crawl
say
across
that.
the counter.
I didn't
okay?
say that.
No, but it's implied in every time it's said. I'm sorry, I've been at this 8 years, and I'm losing it because there's never been a case in any of the meetings I've been in where there has been underhanded activity, and I hear that lack of transparency business too often. It's people that aren't paying attention that then accuse of lack of transparency. And I understand why people can't all pay attention. There's a lot of work. People are working, they have families, they can't all be involved. But people are elected, people volunteer, and they do a lot of work in order to bring these projects forward. Run the committees in town. The municipal government does a bang-up job of getting the best dollar for the buck, and the best work for the buck. And there's been implications that there aren't smart people at the table, and there's lack of transparency, and that's just not the case, and that's the last I want to hear of it for the rest of my term as select board member. Okay, please. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I welcome you to get involved and be on a committee and understand that any committee surrounding this fire station cannot be done in someone's kitchen without minutes being taken by anybody that's involved with the actual project. It all has to be documented in public forums with minutes according to RSA 91A, which we all have to stick to. The select board cannot speak to each other unless we're in a public meeting or a non-public session. We shouldn't even be commenting on Facebook posts at the same time, because not everybody can see those personal Facebook posts. So it's a real struggle to get work done as a board when, I don't know what he's thinking when he steps into this meeting, because we can't speak. That has to be the same for every committee involved with this fire station. There can't be. There was a lot of private money raised for the library, and that was phenomenal. And that kind of thing could happen, to raise private money and then come up with ideas and the specifics of how the building could be fitted up with those private monies. This is all going to be, unless, maybe someone's ready to start a private funding committee. Go ahead and raise as much money as you possibly can. But then have a liaison that sits down publicly in those meetings. Fair enough. I'm off my soapbox now. I'm sorry you hit a nerve, and that's what I am.
I also have a question
Yes, Tom.
before the meeting ends. I'm an architect in town with commercial experience. I won't use the word transparent because you made that apparent. I will use the word open process. So I heard Nicole speak to some upcoming things that will lead to town involvement. That's all that I would ask, is for town involvement. And also, if the end results of the previous year of HTK architectural work, was there a program and a set of plans, and is that linked on the town website?
So the programmatic study.
Yes.
And there is a very basic conceptual drawing. Those are available on peterborough.projects.info. And there is a link to that from the fire department's page on the town website.
Okay. I will follow up with your office to get that link then.
Yep. You can send me an email.
Sure.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes, Bob.
I mean, can you outline for us a few of the major steps that you're going to be taking in the next couple of months? Nicole mentioned a workshop. I'm not even sure what a workshop is, so I have like no clue as to what's going to happen in the next couple of months. Can you just give us like a couple of big picture tasks that you've decided you're going to be tackling?
Well, I think Bill's going to be knocking on every congressperson's door.
Good.
Personally, right? Nicole, what our workshop, the select board generally has a workshop
Yeah.
here to kind of lay out what we're going to be planning for the year.
Exactly. So the selectmen have an annual workshop, and it's typically just, it's done on an off day. Gives them a chance to, over the course of a few hours, go through, where we are with a number of projects, and determine, what's the work that we see before us, what are the selectmen's goals for the upcoming year or so. And obviously, this will play a big role in that. And so typically, in something like that, there's a lot of perfunctory work that gets done in those workshops, including, which selectman is with the liaison to which department, that sort of thing. And then, other things that will get discussed is, like we'll have, Seth, for instance, will bring the selectmen up to speed on what are the, where are we with all the capital projects that we currently have going on, that sort of thing. So that's something that happens every summer, and it's certainly not just about capital projects. It runs the whole gamut of what the town's work is. Some of that is public, and is open to an open meeting for the public. Some of that is non-public and is done at, there are discussions that have to be, taking place behind closed doors for one reason or another. As far as this particular project, as the selectmen just, said, every conversation that they have is done in a public meeting. So all three selectmen have committed to being part of this project, which means that every conversation that they have will be done in a regular selectmen's meeting. It'll be posted.
With each other.
With each other, yeah.
Because we'll be meeting with you,
Exactly.
with Seth,
Yeah.
individually.
Yeah.
So, can I answer Bob's question?
Sure, yeah, of course.
I understand what you're doing, and you're right to be doing it, but the next major steps are, we are, at least myself, not us as a board, we can each work individually with the administration, with the fire department, with Seth. We're gonna be doing as much research as possible into other fire departments that have already been built, first of all. Second of all, we're gonna work on the scope of a RFP, request for proposals, and figure out what kind of language goes in there so that we attract the right type of company to bid on it in the first place. We're gonna work on basically building the plan on how we go forward and not rush it, but do it as soon as possible so that we have something in the next, every single meeting, we wanna have something to report that there's been progress. So it's not like nothing's going on, even, I know, it's like, you know how you get into these conversations with people and they're just waiting to answer you, so they're not even listening to what you say? There's been a lot of that going on, and it's one of the most frustrating parts of it. It's like, we've had public statements, we had town meeting, and we've we've said a lot of this over and over again, and then, so it keeps getting questioned. You're right to keep questioning it. I don't have a problem with that, but the part that I have a problem with is when I come out with a statement, or even at town meeting, and say, this process is gonna be open, transparent, we're gonna include the public and a group of people on elected boards over and over and over again, and then we get questioned about, well, how are you gonna keep this being transparent? It's like, are you calling me a liar or what? Because that is frustrating. And I appreciate being elected again, but I did not see any other names on the ballot below mine or above mine. So any experts are always welcome to run every single year.
If I can just add a little bit onto that.
Yeah, maybe it's
Every-
a little back to the part
every
that you're
stage-
supposed to say.
Yeah, every stage of those conversations that Bill was just talking about will come back to the full select board in a regular public meeting. So, any work, for instance, drafting up an RFQ, that draft RFQ is going to be included in the selectmen's packet and up for discussion at the next selectmen's meeting, so nothing moves forward without that.
Nothing goes anywhere without it going through the select board meeting.
So, it will
Which
be-
is part of the reason why it takes so long.
It will be constant. And of course, as we get further on in the year, through the summer, this will go to the Capital Improvements Plan Committee. There will be public meetings there. This will go to the Budget Committee. There will be public meetings there. There will be many, 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 many years' worth of public meetings on this conversation.
I have just a,
Sorry.
Excuse me, there were other people.
Audrey had her, I think Audrey had her hand up.
Audrey.
Just a suggestion for people, keeping people informed. Channel 22 is not great for watching this meeting.
Yep.
If you could improve both the audio and the visual, I think that would help. There are a lot of people who watch this meeting at home, and I used to be one of them.
We've really tried.
I know
Did
you
try
tried.
watching
We've really tried.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
Because YouTube, the quality is about 1,000 times better. We have no control over what Comcast broadcasts.
Comcast will not invest any money into public stations like this one
Why?
because they're required to by federal law to have them, but they don't want to spend any money on it. They make no money on them. It's a loss center for them. So they really have no interest in even turning the volume up, let alone doing anything to improve we have had the worst time. For instance, there have been periods, I'm sure you remember, where the station has been off the air. It takes us over a month to even find a person who knows what a public station is, let alone how to turn it back on again. I mean, it is just, anyone who has a computer, who has a cell phone, can watch it live on YouTube or Ustream. You can watch it archived on YouTube and Ustream. The YouTube videos don't go back too terribly far. I think it's a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. The Ustream videos go back almost 10 years. So you can follow those links right off the front page of the town website to get to those videos. And then, of course, I think you bring up a really good point about how can people stay informed. If you're not already on the selectmen's email list, please add your email address to that mailing list. That is the way to know exactly what the selectmen are going to be discussing at every public meeting.
Well, that's a good reminder for everybody who isn't here.
Yeah.
And would it do any good for the public to get in touch with Comcast?
You can try.
Has anybody tried to call Comcast lately?
That would even crack
Thank you for bringing that up, Audrey. We do struggle, we have for years. Carol, yes?
I just want to address what Bill was just mentioning, and I can only imagine how frustrating it is to hear over and over again, how are you going to be open and transparent? But people want details, and what Nicole just did was excellent. And that's where I think people are coming from, is you keep saying this broad level, we're going to be open, we're going to be transparent, but she just gave the details, and that's what we're looking for. So I thank you for going through the list that you just did. I look forward to seeing it in the dispatch, on the website, and what have you. But we're looking for details, is what it is.
No, I mean, this is a huge project. I mean, if anyone remembers the process that we went through on the Main Street Bridge project, that was obviously, I hope this doesn't take anywhere near as long as that did, but that was almost 20 years of continuous public meetings, You know, through the design phase, you know, we went through, you know, all the engineering, HTA came to the selectmen's meeting, gosh, at least 10 or 12 times, you know, to make presentations on where they were with the design, to get feedback from the board and from the public. I can't imagine that this would be any different. These are very large, very complicated projects. They take a long time for people to really wrap their minds around the complexity of them, because they are very complex, whether it's a bridge or, you know, public safety complex like this is going to ultimately be. You know, it's going to be a while, so there will be a lot of meetings.
Tyler, I just want to reassure you, I get your frustration, but one thing to keep in mind is that many of us are refugees from very corrupt municipalities. All right. Where, you know, and it takes a while to believe.
That doesn't make everybody guilty of it, though.
No.
I appreciate you saying that, because quite honestly, I'm a bit anti-government myself. But I've sat in, but on the municipal level, and we hear from a lot of the same people.
Yeah, no,
Just
I
think
know.
we're up to no good.
I know.
And it's been concerning over the years for me, and I'm almost at my wit's end with it, so.
But I actually.
know.
If anybody wants to have a look at our bank accounts to see how much secret money is getting funneled in by not being transparent, you're welcome to have a look.
I actually was interviewed by an FBI agent about my interactions in my last municipality. Yeah, that's how corrupt things are. You know, and this is why we're here, why Mary and I are here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and but it takes a while to believe.
Sure.
You know.
I can't remember which of the selectmen said it, but at town meeting, you know, it was said, it might have been you, Bill, I don't remember. But one of you said that, you know, welcomed everyone, all of the legislators to town meeting. And I think that's, it was Bill Kennedy.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think that is an incredibly important thing for everyone to keep in mind, is that we are all the government, you know, and I don't mean me, because obviously I'm town administrator, so, you know.
But you still get a vote.
I get a vote. I only get one vote. You know, and obviously the selectmen direct my work, and they are directed by the people, you know, everybody. So that is one of the great things about being in a small town in New Hampshire, is that everyone participates to the level that they want to participate to, but you can participate all the way. You can be part of the entire process, and that is pretty special.
Another thing you'll learn after being here for a while is there's no place to hide in Peterborough.
No, there is.
Tyler?
Oh, yes, Tom.
And the woman in front of me.
Oh, yeah.
And my question had to do with, that's great what you explained and Nicole explained. So for the RFQ, is it safe to assume that that's part of that behind-the-scenes work that's going to be having public input?
Well, I mean, it's like anything else. That's a complicated document, as you know. You've responded to a number of them, I'm sure, over your career. It's something that staff will probably do the bulk of drafting up, because we have examples that we've used before.
Yeah.
You know, we'll adapt them. You know, we'll make sure that all the necessary statutory language is in there. We'll run it past town attorney to make sure it all makes sense. But then it'll be brought to the public meeting, the selectmen and the public will review it, and ultimately the selectmen will decide, is that what we're going to advertise?
Right,
And that's what will move forward.
Yes, so my main point would be the different approaches to putting the RFQ together, whether they're design, bid, build, or design, build, or construction management. There's all kinds of different ways to do that. And I think what some of us in the town don't want to do is give away the farm. I, for one, as an architect, would advocate for competitive bidding and not to land it in the lap of a design-build firm right off the bat, right after the approval.
Completely understand. I'm not going to speak to that, because that, you know, except to say that we've gone, we're not there yet. Except to say that we've used a whole bunch of different approaches depending on the project. And that I think Seth McLean is really the best person to work with the select board to make a recommendation as to what approach does he think will best suit this particular project. You know, and then it'll be up to the board whether or not they accept that recommendation. But
Sandy, yes.
I was happy to hear Bill Taylor talk about contacting other fire stations that have been built recently, and I just wanted to say that I hope, Bill, that you don't feel like you have to do this by yourself. I think there are probably a number of interested residents who'd be happy to help with that, and it would be great to just reach out somehow and find out who would like to participate. That's it.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear. You said that at some point in the future, the public would be able to look at the RFQ?
yeah,
Was the public able to look at the one that ultimately ended up with HKT being awarded?
I don't recall if we brought that to the selectmen's meeting before it was put out or not. I don't remember. It was
Okay.
a couple
Just
of years
because
ago.
that happened
so-
to refer to Boylston Street, the intersection of Boylston and another street, so I think it might have been like a copy of something. So I would like to be able to review the RFQ before it goes out.
Like I said, it'll go out with the packet. so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I don't remember. That was a couple of years ago now, so.
Oh, yeah, oh.
Sorry, you said it would go out with a packet, which leads me to the question, when is the packet available? Because I looked for the packet for this meeting and I could not find it online yet.
Yeah,
Friday
it's
before.
Friday afternoons. It's posted to the calendar item on the town website that goes with this meeting, so if you see
It's
this
in the calendar?
in the calendar item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or it's another thing, if you're on the select board email address, the whole entire thing.
Okay.
Well, the agenda
No.
will come.
No.
Yeah,
I got the agenda.
Right, well, everything
There's
is
a
gonna be
link.
discussed.
Yeah, there's a link that brings you to it, though.
The packet can be huge at times, so we try not to
Yeah, you
send that
may not be
straight.
able to.
Oh, I'm
email it.
aware.
I was gonna say.
Okay, so is there a reason why you wouldn't put it with all the other packets from past meetings on the same page?
It does go there. It does end up there ultimately.
Right, but not necessarily before the meeting.
Usually it does. Usually it gets uploaded to that same page, right?
So,
You have it posted there.
I'll give you an example. So minutes, packets, and recording.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that page.
Yeah, so usually minutes, packet, and video go on at all roughly the same time. Oftentimes we'll have the packet up prior to the minutes because we have to wait for the minutes to get approved. And we don't actually have the packet for this one on there yet, but I will add that promptly. But those are almost always included on that page, I'd say, within a few days of the select board meetings.
Okay, so.
And the packet is always available on the website from the calendar.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
a useful tip.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The packet also includes building permits and all the correspondence that we get by email from town people.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible to see it because I get countless emails about stuff that's coming up on the meeting.
Well, yeah, I have seen packets in the past, and I on the page there are lots of packets from the past. I just have had bad luck in finding packets for upcoming meetings because I am going to the wrong place apparently.
Be in the right room.
That's it.
Well, thank you. Anything else to cover? Hopefully, master plan, I do liaison to the master plan steering committee, and they've been working on several chapters for update. Hopefully, people have been involved with that, with all the input. They've been asking questions for a long time now, and hopefully getting answers. So that's coming soon. We have a meeting come up Monday, I think. Anyone, anything else happening in other liaison groups?
We haven't approved the minutes yet, as I know. Maybe we have.
Oh.
And I have 2 last-minute requests for
Oh,
other
that's right, you
business.
did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we could also address those too, but
Sweet.
minutes first.
So was that a motion to approve the minutes, Bill?
Yes.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Alan. Those were very thorough.
Okay, and we have started work on some projects this year. So I'm asking the select board to approve 2 requests for reimbursement from trustees of the trust funds. The first one is $28,880 from the Reclamation Trust Fund for the purchase of the glass crusher that we talked about at some length during the budget process. know someone wanted to go try it out themselves. Was it?
I do want to
Yeah.
play with that.
And then the second one is $12,551 from the Adams Pool Improvement Fund for the replacement of filter material in the Adams Pool filter room.
That seems like an awful lot of money for filter.
Boy, is it. Yep, but they're really big filters.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of media that's going into them.
Really dirty pool.
And how does that eke out over how many kids use that pool?
A lot. So, and it will be good for a number of years. We've been using the same filter material since the pool opened, reopened rather,
Reopened.
so.
Yeah, so it's like 9, 10 years.
9, 10 years now, yeah. So it's time for that to be redone.
And is that just the vendor we use, or did they find several to compare?
They
It's,
work quite a bit on it.
yeah, she really tried to find something less expensive. They had gotten a quote back in September for just over $10,500, but unfortunately, like everything else, that quote did not hold. So we're up to $12,551. But we do have the money set aside in the trust fund, so
No taxpayer dollars?
no additional taxpayer dollars.
I move that we approve those two requests.
I'll second those. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
to Lisa and Seth for the crusher. And the second, there was another item?
That was it. Those
Okay.
were the two
Okay.
reimbursement requests that I wanted to get in front of you
Were
tonight.
there some people we needed to approve, appoint to the EDA? Or did we do that last meeting?
No, and I
That's
haven't,
this time.
I haven't gotten anything from the EDA, or I have not seen their draft minutes yet, so I don't have that to put forward.
Danica didn't send it to you?
Danica has been out of the office, unfortunately, so
As liaison to the EDA, can you do the approvals on my word?
it's up to the board.
I don't know, Bill, we're not usually very transparent. I got an email about it. What was that from? Didn't you? Does it have to be officially submitted to us?
Doesn't have to be, that's just been the board's practice.
I mean, I recognize, I think I know all of the people that are,
Yeah,
that
so,
are looking to join or re-up, right?
yeah, who is it, Bill? It was Luca Paris, Carolyn Ho, and,
Laura Jean Grass.
No, not Laura.
no,
No?
it wasn't reappointments, these were new appointments.
Do it.
He's in the audience.
Yeah.
Sorry?
right, right.
Oh, sorry, Dewey Clark, right, that's right.
All were approved by the EDA board, and they just simply need approval. I think everyone has submitted their applications to date. So I move that we approve their appointments.
I just had a question about it. I know that to be on the EDA, you either have to be A, resident, or B, a business owner in town.
Yep.
And does Luca Paris own the Chamber of Commerce, or is he the executive director?
I believe he's the president and executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, and we have had presidents before, you know, basically representatives of the company or the organization or institution. I think, Plagia, for instance, doesn't live in Peterborough, but she's been nominated as the representative to be the representative of their company, and I believe she was on the EDA in the past.
Well, I just want to make sure we're not breaking any rules that
No.
require
Nope.
hours of more meetings.
Well, I appreciate that, and on the other side of that coin, Bill, is Luca can bring a lot of resources with him to the EDA.
Yeah, that I don't doubt.
Good, good collaboration between that group and the group who's working on branding the Monadnock area, so.
I'll second the motion. To approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great,
Aye.
another group of volunteers.
Thank you.
Till the wheel goes round.
Absolutely.
What else? That's it?
That was it.
Before dinner time. Carol, final words.
I understand that over the last, I'd say week and a half to 2 weeks, there was some internal issues with the network, the town network. And I had sent an email just asking if there were certain disaster recovery plans that were in place, that should this, God forbid, ever happen again, what could we do to make sure that everybody was able to do the work they come to work to do? So,
Yes, we have them. They are not public documents because they speak directly to the town's network security, so we can't share those. But we do have them. They are, internal steps and procedures. I can say, just generally speaking, that we are upgrading a network appliance. I don't think everyone in the room knows this. We are upgrading a network appliance. The network appliance was in some ways faulty, and it had a cascading effect on the entire network, unfortunately. And so the guys have been for weeks now chasing down the little gremlins in the system and, pulling them out sometimes with tweezers. It's been incredibly difficult and frustrating for them. They've worked round the clock every weekend, doing a lot of the work at night because that's when it has the least amount of impact on town operations, trying to get everything back up and running. And actually, I really appreciate you bringing that up because it gives me a chance to really thank those guys for the hard work that they've done. Fosh, Tim, Cole, and also Julie, who's, a new member of our downstairs crew. They've just been absolutely fantastic. Getting us back up and running as quickly as possible. But this one has been really difficult. And so what we do when we run into situations like this is triage, essentially. We have, obviously, any effect on public safety gets dealt with first. If there is an impact, when there's an impact on the town's financial software, that's usually the very next thing, if not the first thing, depending on where we are in the payroll cycle, because this isn't a selfish thing. It's not that I don't like being paid on time. Of course I do, and all of us do, but we are required by state and federal laws to pay people when we say we're going to pay them. And so you can run into problems with Department of Labor if you don't get those paychecks out on time. So that's a really serious issue. And then after that, it's chasing down all the other things, make sure we have access to our documents, which are all stored on shared servers. And other little things, for instance, the connections to the state. Those are often very complicated, so we have connections to the state network for registering your cars. You're getting access to vital records. All of those are done through connections to databases. Those systems got interrupted for a couple of days. The guys were able to get them back on pretty quickly. All things considered. But it's an incredibly huge, complicated network. It's really amazing how fast it's grown just the last 15 years that I've been here. But they do a great job trying to keep it up and running. But it is complicating when something like this goes sideways. It can be really hard to...
Was it hardware and software?
Honestly, there's a level of technical that happened that is so over my head that I'm really not sure where the hardware ends and where the software begins in this particular problem. It was very complicated, and when they attempted to explain to me, I just said, all right, stop, just stop. I really don't understand what you're saying. But they were able to get it resolved. They had some help from the vendor to help them finally resolve the issue. So everything's more or less back up and running now. I think the only thing that's still offline is the printer in my office. Of course. Lowest thing on the
I can fix that on my phone board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
That was crazy, but it was a planned.
It was a planned upgrade. Yeah. It was a planned upgrade, and we knew that there would potentially be some disruption, but we weren't expecting it to have, again, that cascading effect that it had. It was exhausting for them and incredibly frustrating. And I also want to thank the rest of the staff, too, for being patient, letting the guys work, and get it back up and running again. So there we go. We learned some lessons, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
we have this saying around here that we make sure that we don't tout when things are going well.
Don't tempt fate.
Right.
Right.
Hear you. Last word, Loretta.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to thank you for including that letter from town council in the packet.
Yeah.
But there were a number of questions that I felt weren't addressed, and I've sent you an email about that.
Did see
So
that.
I hope that you all will take a look at that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Sure. Second. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for nominating me.